Hello, my name is Brittany, and I'm currently needing to get some steps in. So hopefully the sound isn't too loud. I'm really hoping I can reduce the background noise, but thank you for being understanding because I need to get some steps in, and I want to also share this video and encourage others and get this out there. So multitasking, I'm sure you understand. Okay, today, my name is Brittany. I don't know if I already said that. I am here today to talk to the mom that has either already taken her kids out of the traditional public school system, or maybe you're thinking about it and considering it, and you just don't feel super great about the decision. You feel underqualified, not capable of being their full-time teacher, and you're just worried that they might fall behind too. So I want to talk about all of that and maybe share some encouragement. I don't homeschool right now. I have a 2-year-old that I hope to maybe homeschool one day, but I used to teach public school for about 5 years. I taught middle school and then also first grade, and so I feel like I have an interesting perspective that might be helpful for you, and my goal is really to just make you feel a little bit better about that decision, because I do think it's a great decision even as a public school teacher. Also, as I'm doing this, I'm realizing that I might get out of breath, which is so funny because all I'm doing is walking very slowly at an extremely slow pace. But I'm thinking back to how when I sometimes leave voicemails for people, but when I hang up, I have to catch my breath by the end of it. So I don't know if this is a normal human thing or just like a Brittany thing that maybe I need to exercise a little bit more. Probably that, but anyways, just had to throw that out there. Let's see if I can make it all the way through. Okay, so I'm going to pretend like you're asking me some questions. I have 9 questions. I've got some notes over here in case I forget, and I'm just going to answer them and kind of share my honest answers from, like I said, the experience of just teaching public school for 5 years. So let's get into it. The very first one: how do I know if I'm actually capable of teaching my child? Such a good question. And it's funny because I was just thinking about this and how I feel like I felt capable because I had a piece of paper that just literally said you're qualified to teach. I understand there was a lot of classes to get that piece of paper and degree, but it's funny because you're like, Brittany, I can't get that paper. That's the whole reason I'm here. I get that. I mean, you totally could if you wanted to, but I don't think you need it. I think it's funny because I was on paper qualified to teach kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and then math for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, which if you were to put me in any of those classrooms, as soon as I got my degree, I couldn't just go in any of those classes and know exactly what I was doing. Like, that's impossible. There's so many different grades, so many different ages, so many different personalities, and I think that, yes, I learned some things, but you learn so much just as you go. And it's funny that we put a lot of weight in a degree, and yes, they're valuable, but I forgot so much of what I learned in those classes, even as I was, freshly out of college. I don't know that I could remember everything. I couldn't remember everything that I learned in all of those classes. And so I just want to say that when you're probably in the same boat as I was when I was jumping into a classroom as a brand new teacher, or I went from 7th grade to first grade. That felt like I was a brand new teacher again. And so you're probably in the same boat. And I remember listening to really experienced teachers. I don't think I was ever on a panel where I wasn't a person that was like interviewing other teachers to hire them, but I remember just listening to other teachers that were, and I specifically remember them saying they were really excited to be interviewing first year teachers or teachers that were fresh out of college because they loved how much enthusiasm they had, motivation, and just being able to see things maybe differently than how they had always done things. And so I just want to let you know that regardless of your experience, you have something to bring to the table, no matter where you're at, no matter what stage you're at, and you're valuable in some way. You just might not see it. And being capable doesn't mean that you're an expert. I was nowhere near an expert, but I still got hired. I had never taught before, but I still got hired. All of the questions I answered in my interview were just from like my student teaching experiences, or things that I read in a book. And so being capable doesn't mean that you're an expert. It just means that you are able to. You're able to try. You're able to ask for help when you need help. You don't know everything about everything, and that's not the whole point of it. Being capable is just being able to. And that's really all you need, is just to be able to. And like I said, I think you would be shocked to see the similarities we would have as a first year teacher that also was in charge of all of these kids learning. And they all learned, they all went to the next grade. And I think that I put a lot of pressure on myself, and they still learned so much. And I think too, one thing I like to remember is it's kind of impossible for them not to learn and grow. And over a year, they learn and grow so much. I mean, their brains are just like sponges, and they're always learning. They're curious, they're always growing, and it's kind of impossible for them to not learn and grow. So I hope that is helpful. Something else to keep in mind too is you're probably even more qualified than a first year teacher, because you already have the leg up, the advantage of your child really well. When I was a first year teacher, I was meeting all of these kids for the first time on our first day of school. And so I didn't know their learning styles, and even getting to know them throughout the year, I still couldn't tailor everything to all of their different personalities and learning styles and things like that. And so you already have the leg up in that you know your child really well, and there's probably going to be things you learn about each other even more as you do this together. But you already have that advantage of you kind of know them a lot more deeper than a first year teacher would, or any teacher really. I keep saying first year, or any teacher that was just getting into the classroom with your child. Okay, I tried to get some new headphones because I feel like those other ones are falling out a lot. All right, number 2. What should my main focus be in the first few months of homeschooling? So I will say, just from what we did in public school, I do remember there was a lot of emphasis on the routines, the procedures, things like that, expectations, building that community a little bit more, which you probably already have a really good foundation of that in your home. And what was I saying? Oh yeah, so a lot of time I would say, like, I remember when I went to first grade, the teachers would tell me, the other teachers that had been there for a while would be like, just keep in mind, you're probably going to spend like a solid month on a lot of these. I mean, that's not our whole day, but a lot of time is spent on these things. And then when there's a long weekend or there's a break, you're going to come back and be spending a lot of time on this again, because they did know that once those were set in place well and you had a good foundation, then the rest of the learning came a lot easier. And so take with that as you want, because it's going to look a lot different in homeschool or whatever you're doing. But what I do like from that is we didn't just jump into learning. I mean, we took a lot of time to just go into things slowly, and one of my favorite things in middle school is we started doing community building activities, and we found some really fun ones. It was one of their favorite things towards my 3rd or 4th year of teaching 7th grade. We had a new curriculum that was pretty much all group based or team based. It was amazing. I loved it. And we would switch up the groups like every month or so, and we would always, before we jumped into the lessons, or before we like started the new chapter, we would do a team building activity so that the kids would have a day of just fun, doing fun things together, getting to know their new team. And it was like a big challenge or something they had to solve, and they loved it. I loved it. It was so much fun. So don't feel like you need to like jump into things really quick or you're already running out of time. That's the whole point of doing things differently, is so that you don't feel like you have to follow a certain routine or be super strict. Take the time to think about what do you want it to look like. It's going to look different for every family. That's the beauty of it, is you have a lot of freedom. And so what were the reasons why you didn't like what you guys were doing, or the public school system that you had them in, and then use that to kind of fuel what you want it to look like. And keep in mind, it can change. It's probably always going to be changing and evolving, but that'll help you start with a good foundation of what you want your days to look like and what feels good. And take time to maybe do some fun activities together, because you are going to have kind of a new dynamic relationship. And so maybe talk about what those expectations are going to look like and what your days are going to look like. And then don't be afraid to just have some fun. Do some fun activities. You don't have to jump right into it. Okay, number 3. How do I make sure my child is learning the right things and not falling behind? Such a good question. I feel like this is one of the biggest worries, and something I would worry about too. And I think that this will help ease a lot of your worries, because I was the child that did all of the right things. I got all straight A's, really good grades. I was in the AP advanced placement classes, college now classes. In high school, I had gotten college credit, so that when I got to college, I already had some credits. It was ridiculous. It was great, but I would do it differently now, to be honest. At least, I shouldn't say that. I wouldn't change my experiences, because I think that there's always so many lessons to be learned. But I just don't see it as that's the best and right track, even though anybody would probably say that's the right track. And I say that because, if you don't know, my husband, he was kind of the opposite in school. He was really smart, but didn't try as hard. And I remember him being in one of our college classes, and like me and some of his friends were like, "Why are you in here? Like, you do not belong in here. What are you doing? Was this an accident, a mistake?" And it's so funny, because if you had to have one of us on some sort of like, I'm thinking like, Are You Smarter Than the Fifth Grader show? One of those trivia shows, you would 100% always want to pick my husband. He is so smart. And it's just hilarious, because when I think about my experience in education, I think a lot of it was I memorized things and then I forgot it, because I never really fully learned it. I was just memorizing it for that time being, for that test. And then I was doing the same thing with the next test and the next test, and then it's gone. A lot of it is not there anymore. And I think that is such a surface level of learning things too. And when you're, a lot of those advanced classes, I noticed, now that I reflect back on them, they went so fast. And I never really fully feel like I got the time to like really learn to like love what I was learning about, because I just was so focused on, we need to learn this, move on to the next thing, I need to get the good grades, move on to the next thing. It was just constantly like, a cyclical process. And I just feel like that's not what learning should be. I definitely feel like there's a time and a place for memorizing, but I don't think that that's what the majority of your education should be. So I say that because I think we often view that as the right track. I'm still hearing commercials on the radio for people saying, I just heard a commercial the other day that was like, here is a group of like second graders or something in this classroom, or 7-year-olds in this classroom, and here's all those amazing things they're doing, which is great. but I still feel like it can be really easy to focus on like getting advanced and learning as much as you can as fast as possible. I just don't think that learning needs to be that way or even should be that way. So with that being said, there really is no right way, and the beauty of not being in a traditional school is you have the ability to do your own routine, your own schedule, and that can change. With traditional school, it's when we were making lesson plans, we would change things around a little bit if we felt like a lot of kids still hadn't understood a lesson and we needed to spend more time on it. But for the most part, we were on a schedule, we had a curriculum that we had to get through, and the curriculum was already too much to fit into our schedule, so we were already cutting it down from the beginning, and every day what mattered. And so I feel like I see it as, here's your schedule, we get through unit 1 by this day, we take a test and we move on, and we follow kind of what the majority of the kids maybe would follow. But if you have a child that maybe one section they don't understand and they need more time on it, in a normal traditional school they're moving on and now they've got a hole or a gap there. And then for maybe if your child is super advanced, they're going to get bored and they don't want to be there. So it sets you up to have more flexibility, tailor more to what they need, and there really is no right track. Every kid learns so differently. I think that's what the hardest thing is about normal traditional school, is we see it as so linear, but learning is never linear. And when we just bring back that love of learning again by, you're interested in learning about panda bears, let's do like panda bears for the next week. It brings back that love of learning. I was saying this in another video I made. I've been learning a lot about sunlight, and if I got like this book on sunlight, I have been watching videos on sunlight. I've been loving it. I've been spending like the last month of my life learning all about sunlight, and it makes me feel super excited, and it brings back that love of learning, which any opportunities we can find to bring that love back is so important, especially because I don't know if you notice this, but as kids get older and older, they just start to resent school a lot more, and something is happening, and any ways that we can bring back that love of it is perfect. And if you're worried, like I feel the same way of, I do want to make sure my child's hitting, like basic guidelines or basic things. So there's definitely going to be state guidelines, but I would assume most homeschool curriculums have some like checkpoints and assessments in there and things like that. Just like if I was teaching public school, when we were teaching, we had the same things. They would give us tests to use, or we would create tests to use based off of the Common Core, whatever standards we had to look at. And so I'm sure the homeschool curriculums and resources have similar things of, here's some assessments, here's some quizzes, here's some checkpoints to kind of see how they're doing, so that you at least have that peace of mind that they're getting those basic things that you need. And just remember that as a teacher, I remember there was lessons where I was like, this is a silly lesson. This is really silly. I don't really feel like it's that important, but it was in the curriculum, so we had to do it. And there was other lessons that were really valuable to real life, and I wanted to spend more time on it. And so you're just going to have so much flexibility to focus on the things that are really important. And so I don't feel like you can do it right or wrong. Everybody has we all have different experiences with the things that we've learned in life. And that's what makes this world so beautiful, is that my strength is your weakness and vice versa. So don't get hung up on this is right, this is wrong. Maybe, sure, pay attention to those basic things, and then don't be afraid to like jump into the things that are really that your child is really interested in, or you're really interested in, and just have more fun with it. Number 4, do I need to follow a strict curriculum, or can I be more flexible? you probably already know my answer to that. That's the beauty of it, is you don't need to follow a strict schedule. You can be flexible. And I see people, just from like experiences from people I've heard that homeschool or reading things online or on social media, people do things all differently. Sometimes families will do like a year-round thing and just always always do homeschool a little bit each day, or sometimes people will still take summer vacation or spring break. So you have the flexibility to do what feels best for your family. And with that being said, if a strict schedule feels better to you, then you can do that. I think that some people really thrive with some structure and knowing exactly what the plan is. And some people like to have a variety and have options and have flexibility. And so you can really do either. You can be like I was with teaching. We had kind of the year laid out of what it would look like, and then we adjusted some days here and there as needed, and that might work really well for you. So do what feels best to you. Number 5, what's something I should stop worrying about that public school made me feel was essential? And one of the things that comes to mind is grading. We had to do a lot of grading sometimes to kind of see where kids were at, especially when you have 30 kids. I don't always know where everyone is at with everything. So that's definitely going to look different. And when you're just homeschooling with your child, you probably already have a pretty good idea of where they're at. I know that when I was working one-on-one with kids, I had a pretty decent understanding of where they were at. So yes, we definitely want them to be able to do things on their own, but I think that it doesn't have to be as like, this is the big unit test that you have to ace. It doesn't have to look like that. I mean, I think about real life with a lot of, when I'm thinking of what seems realistic or what doesn't, I think about real life. And with a lot of knowledge, we have so many options and resources available to us that we can look up and find the answer. We don't have to just always have things memorized, especially if we don't use that information very often. So yes, we should, there's some things we should know, but it doesn't have to be as strict and rigid as maybe it is in like a traditional school setting. And I don't think that there needs to be so much pressure, I mean, I hear I don't feel like I hear this anymore, but I know I've heard stories of like, this test is 50% of your grade, and it's like, what if you get really nervous during tests, And sometimes test questions are worded to trick you and confuse you. And I mean, I can think of so many examples where I was like, I know this information, but I don't know how to answer this question. It's very confusing. So yeah, that can definitely look a lot different than what we're used to it looking like. And then, of course, the other thing that always comes to mind is just sitting still for hours or a long time. I think a lot of us know by now that movement is so good for us. And I'm thinking a lot about my son, who's just squirrel brain. I'm like, you are the child that I would be like, dude, just sit down. And so just sitting still is like very unrealistic, especially as they're younger. And I mean, I'm currently doing stuff while I'm walking. I do that a lot with work. I'm walking and working, and helps your brain keeps the blood moving, helps your brain work better. There's a lot of research on that. And so they don't just need to sit still. Yes, sure, they can do, I think it's definitely important to do some workbook work or, writing things down. Of course, that's important. There's a time and place for that, but getting kids up, moving, I think being outside is just some of the most important things. And of course, like hands-on learning activities are, I think, so valuable. I think that when I think back to my teaching, the days where we had some really fun hands-on lessons, I remember one lesson where the kids got to blow bubbles, and then when they fell on paper, we would measure like the diameter and radius of it and things like that. And that was so fun. So anytime that they could be up moving around and have like try to relate it to a real life hands-on activity or something that makes sense in real life, they had the most fun and they probably remember it the most because they see that connection. 6, how do I handle subjects I don't feel confident teaching? A great question. I honestly, there's a lot of topics that I don't love. Like, I don't love history, I don't love social studies. I really just like math. I feel like I really just like math. But this is another one that I feel like you'd be shocked to know that most lessons in the morning, I would come in and read what the lesson was about, and then that's what I would teach for the day. So there's so much that sure, if you have taught the same thing for 10, 15 years, yeah, you probably know that material really well. Okay, when in first grade, yeah, most of it anybody would probably know, even though there was some lessons where I was like, what's the difference between these two things that they're learning? So there was definitely still, like in reading, for example, they would learn about, it's not like an adverb or an adjective, but like one of those things. And I didn't have that in the back of my head. I didn't have that memorized. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'm kind of like relearning this today because I didn't remember that. So there was a lot of things, especially in 7th grade math, where I was like, I was either relearning something or I was learning the newer curriculum we had a lot of like explanations of why things worked. And so that really blew my mind because I had always just memorized formulas and things like that, and just learning the understanding behind why something worked or maybe why a formula worked was really interesting, and I was learning right alongside the kids. So I think that don't feel like you have to be an expert in anything. You can learn along with your kids, and I think it's so good for them to see that you're not an expert in everything. I remember there was a time where I taught a lesson wrong. Like we did a whole lesson. That night I was like, oh my gosh, I misunderstood this and I taught it wrong. And the next day I explained to the kids, so sorry, I taught you guys this thing wrong. I'm so sorry, this is probably so confusing. And they were so forgiving, so understanding, like a bunch of 13-year-olds. And we laughed about it. It was a great laughing time, a great laughing moment. And I retaught them the new way, the right way, and it was no big deal. And they got to see that I'm a human. And sometimes I think that is like the most valuable lesson. It's just, when we're in school, regardless of what the school situation looks like, and we're not just there to learn academics, we're there to learn so many other things, which I think gets left out a lot in public school. Soft skills, learning to collaborate with other people, learning to be a human and make mistakes. And yes, those come up a lot in public school, but any times that you can really have those opportunities and be like, oh yeah, I'm a person, I'm still learning, I made this mistake, is so good for your kids to see that too. And it helps them, I think, feel more safe when they make a mistake or aren't an expert or need some more time on something too. So that's great. Oh, and there's so many resources, YouTube videos, ChatGPT, anything that you don't feel super confident in. I'm sure that there's someone else there that is an expert in that topic and can help you, and you guys can learn something together. Okay, number 7, what does a realistic homeschool day look like? I think this is another really hard thing because normal school is like 7 hours, and then I will see some parents be like, but we're only, like, how do we do a 7-day school, a 7-day school day at home? Which you're not, you can't, and you do not need to. I think that I did the math for it one time, and the time that the kids are actually like in the classroom is probably like closer to 3 or 4 hours. And let's say we do an hour for math. That hour, sometimes you're like catching up maybe from the day before or reminding them on stuff from the day before. And then, you're calling on people throughout the classroom to get everyone involved. And that time is just a lot shorter when you only have one or a handful of kids. The other thing to keep in mind is a lot of time is spent just helping kids. And let's say we do a problem, and out of 30 kids, 10 of them have their hand up, they need some help. I go around and help them, and like 10 minutes has gone by, and you've got like the other 20 kids have done it. They've just been waiting this whole time, and some of them have finished the whole worksheet already. They're done. They're ready for the next thing. So the bummer part is, I think that was one of the hardest things for traditional public school, was I could not help all the kids at the level that they needed to be helped. And a lot of time was just spent either kids waiting or kids getting bored. And yes, there's things that teachers can do, but it really is impossible to cater to all of that every single day and to be able to help all the kids with where they need it. Like a kid that's really struggling with a lesson, they might need you for like 10 minutes that day and maybe 10 minutes the next day. So if you're doing math, or let's say you're in 7th grade, you've got a 50-minute class period, that's a fifth of your class period, So if you spend 10 minutes with 5 kids and then your time's up, I mean, the kids, just like I said, they don't always get what they need, and a lot of time might be spent just waiting. There's just a lot of wasted time, and that gets really shrunk, and your time is used so much more efficiently. Kids are getting what they need a lot better when there's a smaller environment. So that's one of my favorite things about homeschooling, or just a different environment, is they really need a smaller environment to get more out of it, in my opinion. And so it's going to look different for everybody that homeschools, but I know that I hear a lot about kids spending maybe like 30 minutes on some workbook work, and then maybe there's an activity, or maybe that day you're baking, who knows. There can be so many different things, but you might have like 1, 2, 3 hours of homeschool that you're doing a day. It's going to be a lot less than what you're expecting, and some days you might, and it can fluctuate too. Some days you might be spending more time, some days you might be spending less time. So it definitely depends. All right, number 8. I'm just going to do this one and one more. Number 8. What are some of the biggest mistakes new homeschoolers make? I think that just trying to replicate public school. I know that in like Instagram accounts that I follow, that is something I see a lot of people will say, what is the biggest thing you learned? And it's just that, the whole point of homeschool is you're trying to do something different. So don't get hung up on it needs to look like public school, or it needs to look like the school that you have in your mind, or what learning should look like. It's not going to look like that, and it might feel weird, but it's supposed to be different. That's the whole point. And number 9, how can I help my child love learning instead of just getting through the work? And I kind of mentioned that a little bit ago, but I think that in when I was teaching, we would mix things up. Like we would take like I said, those team building activities, we would do that once in a while. They could earn things. Don't be afraid to do that kind of stuff. Bribery, giving them just rewards. Kids just work so hard. I remember just so many days just being amazed by their work ethic. Sometimes they would just really be putting, I would have kids that would finish things and then they would go help other kids, and I was like, gosh, you're amazing. And just reinforcing so much of that positive behavior and rewarding them it makes it more fun, and just finding ways to make things fun and be flexible, not act, don't. It's life. Learning is a part of life. It doesn't have to be like, this is something that we have to do. It's part of life. No matter what you're doing throughout the day, they're always going to be learning. They're curious. They naturally want to understand things. And so follow those interests that they have, and just try to have fun whenever you can. In those moments where it's not fun, don't feel like you're doing something wrong. That was really hard for me, in especially first grade. That was the hardest year for me, and I felt like a failure pretty much most days. But it's easy to get caught up in feeling like you're always maybe feeling like you're doing something wrong. And it just might be a time to kind of like reevaluate. Something I learned a while ago was like, frustration can be an invitation to doing something new. And so it might just mean maybe your routine needs to be revamped a little bit. Maybe the motivation or reward system you were using isn't working anymore. You need to do something different. Sometimes it's just a little tweak. So try not to be super hard on yourself. And when you have those frustrating moments, remember your wins and take time to reflect on what maybe needs to be changed. And remember that this isn't like a set in stone thing. If you do homeschool and you decide it doesn't work, no big deal. Put them back in public school or a different school. We don't have to take life so seriously. They're gonna be fine. They're gonna be just fine. We have all been fine. And just you caring about this and wanting to do the best for them is just proof and evidence that they're going to be just fine, and no matter what you do, they're going to be okay. And those good moments, enjoy them, and then the harder moments, to remember that they're lessons and that it could just be some little tweaks that you need to do and you're back off and running again. So, and remember, it's not a race. Learning is not linear. It is going to have ups and downs just like anything in life. So yeah, I'm going to end it there. I hope that was helpful. I hope that gives you some encouragement. And let me know what other things, like, did this spark other questions for you? I would love to know maybe what else you're struggling with or what other questions you have.